people who hear this, even for 15 minutes, realize that Hasidus is meant to be understood. You're showing them that it can be understood. It's not mystical. You're demystifying it.
So let me ask you a question. Is it possible to understand something, to understand the concept, and not be able to explain it? Or is it true that if you can't explain something, it is because you don't understand it? Because the reason I'm asking it is, you talk about the Rabbi Yoel, you come over to him and you ask him, how is A the inner dimension of B? And he says to you, what's an inner dimension? Right? He asks you to understand, what does this mean? And you line up 10 teachers, and 9 of them would not ask you that question. They would just answer whatever you asked, and you would walk away not understanding. But how could it be? How could it be that the good-hearted, wise teachers would allow a student to walk away without a complete understanding of what they're trying to teach them? Is it that there are people who understand things, but they're just not good at explaining it? Or is it that he understood things better than everybody, or he understands things better than your average teacher, and therefore he explained it better? You know what I'm saying?
Yes, and I think both things are true. There are people who understand very well. In fact, they understand it so well they can't explain it. In other words, they understand it on such a deep level, they can't translate it into simple language.
Have you heard somebody try to explain something on a level that's too high for the teachers? Your teachers?
Yeah.
Too high.
Yeah.
I mean, you say under challenge. That means the explanations were too low.
We had one teacher. He wasn't really a teacher, but he would give a class once a week in 770. And he was talking about Eid Ein Sof, which is infinite light in English. So somebody said, what does Eid mean? He says, Eid? Eid? Eid is Eid is it's Eid. He was so inspired by the idea, he couldn't put it in words. He had to calm down, So he was trying to, instead of trying to explain what it is, he was trying to convey how precious and how awesome, and that didn't come out in words.
So by the way, his own guy.
The same worker, teacher, administrator, whatever he was, he came into 770 once, middle of the day. We were learning Gemara, and he bangs on the table for attention, and he says, I just got to tell you this. I went to the doctor because I had headaches. You know what the doctor told me? My shoes are too tight. He says, you understand what's going on? If the shoe is too tight, it can hurt your head. He was so excited. If there's something wrong at the bottom, it can affect the top. If there's something wrong in the practical, it can disturb the theoretical. Anyway, he was given to excitement about the idea more than the structure or intelligence of the idea. So he had a very hard time communicating. But I just read in that same sikha that there was an individual, at times it's a Tzemach Tzedek, who was very generous with his time, and he taught people who had never heard of Chassidus. But he had a very difficult time explaining things. So he said to the Rebbe when he was visiting, he said, I have a really hard time expressing myself. So he was saying, maybe I should stop because it's awkward. And the Rebbe thought about it and said, no, you should continue teaching. And in reward, God should bless you with the ability to express yourself. And then the previous Rebbe writes, anybody who knew that man remembers that everything he said were like pearls. He became so expert at explaining things that people would come to listen to him just because of how beautifully he expressed it. So you can have a person who really knows but can't bring it down. Then you have a person who doesn't really know and then can't bring it out. So both things are true.
But how do you understand something in your head and not be able to explain it in your mouth? I don't mean to get off track here. We're supposed to be reminiscing about people.
Yeah.
But with Yoel, this is the discussion. How do you understand something in your head? You obviously have words in your head to explain it to yourself. Why can't you explain that to somebody else?
You know the experience of talking to yourself in your head? Some people think in thoughts, and some people think in language. It's like talking to yourself, literally, giving yourself a speech. That's how you think. So it depends on how abstract your thinking is. Thought doesn't have a language. You think in images. To go from that to words is for some people painful and frustrating because it limits, it restricts the idea. And you don't want to do that. You want the idea to be bigger than life. So some people have a hard time restricting or contracting their thoughts into something as klutzy as words. And you find this actually even among the greatest sages who wrote commentaries on Torah. Some of their writings are so easy to read. It almost reads itself because it's so well written. And other commentaries, their sentences and you don't know what they're saying. You got to really try hard to get what they're saying because their writing style was not so smooth. And one of the great things about the Alter Rebbe, both in the Tanya and in his Shulchan Aruch, is that he is so readable. L'shoinei hazohov, the Rebbe would say. So it's a gift to be able to bring things down into words when your mind is so excited and stimulated by the abstraction of the idea.
So does that mean that somebody who thinks on a lower level will be a better teacher?
Yes, for a lower level student, yeah.
So you have to have a guy who has a very high way of thinking, thinks in a sublime abstract, and then is able to talk it in simple language, and then you have an ideal teacher.
Yeah, I think eventually, if you're a good student, you get to recognize when a teacher has told you everything they know, and there is no more. That's it. So sometimes you ask a teacher a question on what they taught you, and they just repeat what they said. You say, I heard that, but how do you explain that? They say it again. And you realize that's all they have. They have told you everything they know. You can't squeeze blood out of a turnip. On the other hand, you have teachers who explain something very impressively, and you get the distinct impression they're not telling you everything. They know more. There's more there, and they're not telling you. You get to develop a sense of that.
They're holding back.
Yeah, it's like singers. You know, they hit a high note, and then some singers, boy, that's it. They can't go any higher than that, or they're going to crack. And then others, you think, wow, they could have hit an even higher note. So you can see when a person has reached their breaking point. in any area, in anything.
Ty, is my sound good? Can you hear me?
I hear you loud and clear. You hear an echo?
No, somebody complained that my sound is no good. Okay, so now that you have, so now after everything we just discussed, where does WL fit into this?
I spoke to WL not long ago, and I asked him to continue. He had these little clips that they put online, a 15-minute thought, and he was wondering whether it's effective, it's worth the time and effort. So first I was impressed. The man is pushing 90, and he's worried about his time. He's busy. Every 90-year-old should be so busy. So he asked me if I think it's worth the effort and if it's effective. I said it's very effective because people who hear this, even for 15 minutes, realize that Hasidus is meant to be understood. You're showing them that it can be understood. It's not mystical. You're demystifying it. And some people still have the impression that Hasidus is meant to nurture your soul in some mystical fashion, but you can't really understand it.
Right.
So Rabbi Yoel, in all the years, more than anybody else, made Hasidus understandable. And if you didn't understand it, you're failing. It's a personal failure because you should be able to understand it. So I remember the first time Rabbi Yoel said to somebody, one of the students, he said, so what do you, we finished learning a mimer, and he says, no, so what do you know? These were smart kids. He repeated what the mimer said. Rabbi Yoel said, no, I know that the mimer knows. I'm asking you, what do you know? So the guy said, what it says. We learned what it says, so I know what it says. He says, you don't know. Tell me what you know and don't use the words of the mimer. This was a little radical because in previous generations, you weren't really expected to bring it down that earthy in your own words, in your own understanding. These are holy words. You're supposed to repeat them, memorize them. You chazer a mimer. You repeat it. You review it. You don't have your own knowledge of godliness. And to Rabbi Yoel, that was a failure. Now that you learned the mimer, what do you know? Of course, you know the mimer. That's not really called understanding.
We have a Sunday night program for VIPs that you might be interested in. It's informal, it's questions and answers, it's conversation. It's really relaxed, it's really pleasant, enjoyable, informative, and kind of community-like. It's a Sunday night program. There's a Wednesday morning program for the VIPs, and there's a Wednesday night program. All of it just conversation, casual, laid back, unscripted. So join us, take a look, click the link below and see which of the three suits you best, and join us for some enjoyable conversation.